All right. And I will, this is the hardest thing for me because I love to see faces, but I will be sharing my screen right now. So bear with me just for a moment while that comes up. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, all right, let's see.
Now we can.
All right. Uh-oh, where did it go? Hold on, there we go. Okay.
Okay, there you go. You weren't kidding about that screen top there.
Yes. And so we can see right now, we can see the screen there, just double checking.
Yes, we've got it, perfect.
Okay, all right. So my name is Kevin Anderson. I work with a group called Daily Acts in our youth leadership program, Eco to School. We've been doing this since 2006 in terms of our climate leadership program. We inspire youth, specifically high school youth, to take action for immediate greenhouse gas emissions while promoting long-term personal and community environmental action. I'll pass it over to Nicole so you can introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicole Warwick, and I am lucky enough to get to manage the Eco to School Youth Leadership Program at Daily Acts. I want to tell you a little bit about Daily Acts. We are a small but mighty grassroots nonprofit. The goal of our work is to inspire people to reclaim the power of their everyday actions to create a more regenerative, resilient, and a just world. We teach sustainability skills, host different action campaigns, build networks and coalitions, and we teach leadership skills. And one of the leadership skills that we teach and practice in all of our meetings and events is to take a moment before we begin to breathe and to kind of quiet together. So I wonder, Kevin, can you lead us in this practice, please?
I would absolutely love to.
Thank you.
So go ahead, wherever you are in the world right now, your home, close by, find a comfortable place to sit and slowly either close your eyes or let your gaze fall to the floor. But if you can, try to hold decent posture here. We're gonna just go for about 2 minutes and settle into this moment right here, right now. So notice your breath coming in through your nose and out through your mouth. And we'll continue this way for the next 2 minutes. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Now when it happens, because it's inevitable, your mind wanders to the long list of to-dos that you have, maybe other things going on in your life, maybe some stressful things like a global pandemic might crush your mind. Don't worry about it. No guilt. Just gently bring your awareness and remind yourself that you're just focusing on your breath right now. Feel the effect that gravity's having on you right now, keeping you right in this moment, your seat. And continue feeling that sensation of the breath coming into your nose and out through your mouth. Once again, if your mind wanders, totally natural, it's working. But just remind yourself, bring your awareness right back to your breath. On these next couple breaths, really focus on elongating the out breath. And focus on making it a little longer than the in breath. Let's take one more together. In through your nose and out through your mouth. And you can wiggle your toes and fingers, open your eyes, bring back to the room. Thank you very much. And for those that are just arriving, welcome. We're honored to have you here.
Thank you, Kevin. That was nice.
One of the things I should have pointed out too is I did pick this quote because I thought it was a good one. For those of you that know the street artist Banksy, if you get tired, learn to rest, not to quit. And so part of this challenge is recognizing that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, although we seem to be moving at a sprinter's pace right now. Please keep working on bringing it back to the breath and working on self-care. And we're going to get into exactly how the challenge relates in a minute. So Green Heart Community Design Challenge, I think everybody on this webinar has an idea, so I'm going to go a little faster so we leave time for more of the creative side at the end, but I did want to go over a few things. It's a framework and pathway for high school youth to respond to our current environmental, climate, and social crises, an examination of our own relationship to power, personal power, the power of connecting to community, and then the power to change things. I think we're all here because we recognize we do need a change. The youth vision, I'm very adamant, is so important as part of this shift, this power dynamic, for many different reasons. But first and foremost, your vision is outside of the current structures of power. Your vision is outside of the problems that got us here in the first place. And so having a fresh perspective is very, very important. It's not only because I come from a family of educators, but it's also something I've seen now for many years working with youth of all ages. Policy is something we're trying to change because we know something needs to change. And so that's how we move things at speed and scale. You know, a good example of that will be today our energy policies in general. We're going to get into community choice energy. So you are able to kind of see just what's going on there in terms of how quickly things can change for the good. And then our communities are that big bridge between the personal actions and then the big policy change. So that's what the Community Design Challenge is focusing on, is engaging our communities. So processes and tools, for those of you that have been on the website, I know there's a lot there, but the process is at the bottom. It's the root of the Community Design Challenge. It's how we're going to move through it. Today, we're really, we already started with a notice and reflect, looking at our mind and starting with our breath. But we're really going to be swimming in the see the system and empathize stages. Although you can visit all of the stages multiple times. It's a circular pattern. It's not linear. So really swimming in the notice and reflect and see the system and empathize today. There's the diagram. This came from Stanford, combination with the National Equity Project, based on a design thinking that has been around for a long time in Silicon Valley, but also making sure that equity is at the forefront. So we're looking at making sure every voice matters. Design tools, we've selected these because we all want a healthier future. And so all of these tools that we've had over the course of already, we've looked at transportation and urban land use. We've also looked at soil through community gardens. But today we're going to be looking at buildings and energy. So deep dive, I was telling Nicole before we started here, this is a big topic because we spend the majority of our time in the built environment, but I had to really pare it down. So we're not, I recognize that today is not going to be, you could do a full webinar on each one of our design tools within buildings and energy, but I did my best to pare it down to really get us excited about some of the ones that are coming through the pipeline right now, even locally. So here's our overview for today. Sharing our observations we're going to get to in a second. You can see on the right-hand side, we did our best to keep the design modes in the forefront so we know where we're at. You can start to understand there. We're going to be looking at our extractive energy system. And then also looking at the really exciting places of where we can go, where we're already going. And then we're going to get into ideate and prototype in terms of the design tools, specifically today, microgrids, sustainable buildings, solar energy, and then battery storage. But there's a ton more that we can also discuss through some Q&A, which we're going to get to at the end. All right, first, this was an interesting one for me to think about today. So would love to hear from the group here. What did you do today that required an energy source? So hopefully everybody can contribute at least once, if not a couple times. But just think about it here. Take a pause. What did you do today that required an energy source? And you can either punch into the chat or just take yourself off mute, whatever works for you. I just realized I can't actually see the chat.
Today, I mean, there's like everything I've done, I guess, that requires some form of energy. But like using my electronics, like my laptop right now or my phone, things like that.
Thanks, Terry.
Getting on to this meeting.
Absolutely. Getting on to the
Yeah.
meeting.
Using my Chromebook for class today.
Yeah, I want to lift up in the chat, cooked oats for breakfast.
Electronics, laptop, phone, being on this actual webinar, participating in class, cooking. Absolutely, that router. Thanks, Logan. I'll add today, I didn't personally get in an automobile, but there's been a couple of guests by our house where we realized we have rats. So we've had a couple people come in to look at the rats. They all were driving. So transportation required, and then multiple energy sources. One showed up in an EV actually, which was kind of cool. Turning on the lights, absolutely. Any others that you all can think of today? And this is just today, right? Charging the phone, right?
I took a shower with hot water today.
I'm thinking like even like eating required like people to make the food, which required a lot of like energy and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great call.
Keep going like with that thread of, yeah, think of that thread and where the food comes from and the energy it takes to get that food from the farm to your table. Mm-hmm. Emily said she used her alarm to wake up this morning. And Logan had the heater. Warmth. Yeah.
Any others that you can think about for just today? And it's, what is it, 4:15, 4:16? So there's still plenty of time, right? We're approaching peak time. Right around 4 to 9 p.m. is when the majority of energy is used in a home in a city.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Sink, the water has to get there. Absolutely. And then also depending on if your toothbrush is electric.
Yeah, it's an electric toothbrush, so that also counts.
Yeah. Thinking I got to do some laundry later.
Yep. In fact, right now, I don't know if you can hear it. Our washing machine is doing the spin cycle, so things are shaking. Washer and dryer. Yeah. So I think then we can, if you think of any, feel free to throw it in the chat. I can finally see the chat, so which is really nice. But yeah, the point of this exercise is a lot of things we take for granted. I don't know if any of you have ever been somewhere pretty remotely where you don't have energy right at your fingertips. It's only been a few times for me, but when it has, it's been can kind of take some of these things for granted, and almost everything we've done today in some form has required energy from the grid, which we'll get to in a moment. So thank you guys very much for thinking about that. It's a deeper level to think about these things. And I think through convenience, through our this industrial economy, a lot of these things have just gone under the surface. We don't think about them from time to time just because it is so convenient to be able to plug something in. It doesn't mean it has to end where we're going with the clean energy economy, but it's just something to think about for sure. All right. So just to make sure we have some common terms and shared language, we're in the C system right now. Really important to make sure we're all on the same page. Language is a very, very important thing, and oftentimes we can not even be on the same page because we're using different languages in terms of terms. So picked a few out here to describe our current energy system. I thought that was important before going into where we're headed. So our current energy system, I thought this was a pretty simple graphic, which is always an easy thing. But right now, this is America. I don't want to go all the way out into the rest of the world because there's a lot of things going on. But this is generally speaking how in our American suburban nation, electricity is generated and then transmitted and distributed. So a power plant, you can see there on your left, usually generates it in the form of some type of energy. We'll get to the fossil fuels in a second, but usually it's energy is generated through turbines, very large turbines, moving electrons. It goes through a transformer, and then generally a big utility company, which we'll get to in a second, they maintain the transmission lines. I think we're all aware of some of the things that have happened in this county due to that, but this is the system. Eventually goes into a neighborhood transformer, and then the distribution lines take it directly to our homes. So it's, I think this is a good graphic because it does it justice in terms of the really long distance that the energy has to travel. And we'll get into some of the issues with that in a second, but the real big one is that a lot of times energy is lost when you're transporting it over really long distances. So fossil fuels, I think majority of you guys, I'm sure know, or all of you know this term by now, but I love this graphic. It always makes me chuckle. But yeah, I mean, obviously, fossil fuel is pretty self-explanatory, but fossilized buried remains of plants and animals that lived millions of years ago. So ancient energy is another way, or ancient sunlight is how I've heard this described. For most of human history, it was recent sunlight. We were just using directly from, whether it be solar, that type of thing. But we've definitely been able to tap into, ancient sunlight and now store vast amounts of energy in the form of course, coal, oil, and natural gas. Those are the big ones. I know there's a few others we could discuss, but those are the big ones right now in terms of climate change. So coal, oil, and natural gas are the three. And the problem, of course, with that is the more coal, oil, and natural gas we burn, the more the atmosphere ultimately has a thickened blanket effect. So we burn these substances, and it thickens the blanket around our atmosphere, trapping in heat, and then warming up our land, our water, and of course our air. So a really important one to point out, it's a tough one. It's one of those ones where I studied history in both undergraduate and graduate school. And this is a tough one. It's not actually taught oftentimes as this term. This is a more modern term used by lots of frontline communities. But it's definitely one that I think is a good one. It's an extractive economy is what we're living in our current paradigm, which is a capitalist system that views natural resources as commodities. We dig, burn, and dump with no regard for its impact on democracy, community, and workers. Talked to almost all of you about this, but it's a real difficult one because it sees our natural resources as commodities and as privately owned commodities, I should say, and not publicly owned. So I struggle with public versus private in general, but this is a big one in our economy, the private control of public resources in a nutshell. It definitely perpetuates the enclosure of wealth, power for a few, and takes goods and services and both exploits those, exploits the land, and then obviously also human labor is involved in that as well. And so you can see a couple of spaces of how fossil fuels are extracted and what ends up happening due to that. Pretty horrifying for sure, and not something you see or even have to think about when we're plugging in our devices. Investor-owned utilities. This is a term that it definitely needs to be front and center for lots of reasons, but just as an extractive economy concentrates wealth in a very few amount of people's hands, investor-owned utilities are part of that paradigm. So they're private, it's a monopoly, they control our power, generally, multiple steps along the line of generation, extraction, and then distributing. And I picked these out because these are the big three in California: PG&E, San Diego Gas and Electric, and then Southern California Edison. And we're slowly seeing a shift, which we'll get to in a second. But investor-owned utilities in general, it's the old model of wealth in a very small amount of hands. And then policy. It's a big one to point out because this is ultimately how we're going to change things. It's going to start, of course, grassroots is an important thing. What we're doing here today, thinking about our own personal power and how our community can change policy, but ultimately policy are what changes things at speed and scale. So whose problems get addressed, how these problems are addressed, and how public power and resources are distributed. So that's it in a nutshell, and something we all need to really think about to change things quickly here. So before we get into some of the more exciting responses and interventions, I wanted to bring up some things that are probably on your minds in terms of the last few years. We all have experienced multiple natural disasters, and so I wanted to, I'm going to take some notes here while we bring this up, and I do apologize if this triggers some difficult emotions. I know it sure did when I was typing these questions out for myself. But what do you remember about losing power during the fires? And that could be any one of the last few years. What did you and your communities have to do differently? And then we can also talk at the end in what is happening in Texas right now, which I know Daniel did bring up the other day when we were talking. So let's start here. What do you remember about losing power during the fires? And you can take yourself off mute. There's a few of us, or you can totally do that, or put it into the chat, whatever works.
I'm just gonna say during the first fire, news of the fire was kind of hard to get because it was an unexpected thing, extremely unexpected. And we could see the fire. It wasn't very close. We could see the fire from where we lived. And so while we were driving, we stopped at a friend's house to stay there for a while. And they had no power. And so we had to kind of limit the use of our devices, because news of them the fires was important, and we had no other way of getting it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing that.
Initially for us, that first year of those fires, we left because my aunt, her apartments were directly in front of Taylor Mountain, so they were evacuated first, and she alerted us before we lost power. So then we left Santa Rosa and we stayed at my cousin's house for 2 weeks, and then luckily down there they weren't affected at all. So they're in the Silicon Valley, and there we watched the news, and we just watched pretty much all hell unfold in Santa Rosa as things started to burn. And it was unfortunate to see because I personally knew several people that didn't leave and stayed behind in the Roseland area. It wasn't affected, thankfully, but I know for a fact that they didn't have power during that time.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Daniel.
Sure.
lifting up out of the chat that Carissa said she lived in the country, so no power meant no water. And for me, no water and no communications, because cell phones don't work where I live in the woods. Being in the woods and not being able to communicate or get any information.
I don't remember much from the first fire, so I can't really say anything.
About this, Emily, were you here for that? And the power outage?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember. But then again, like where I live, I wasn't really like affected by any of the evacuations. Like I couldn't really see any fires. I had to go drive, like if I wanted to see any smoke or anything like that.
Thanks for sharing that.
We are.
When you didn't have water, Carissa, what did you do differently? Or guys had to do differently because you didn't have access to water?
We had to, like, since we knew that power was possibly going to be shut off, we had to fill up a lot of buckets and water bottles beforehand and hope that it kind of lasted us through as long as we needed it to. Our neighbor had a pool, so if we really got desperate, we could have used that to flush toilets. And yeah.
Thanks. I'm appreciative that you mentioned that thing about the pool, because it seems like you were collaborating with others to kind of scout out what resources you had available to you without having access to water.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great strategy.
On that note for us.
Any other things that you guys noted differently? How about you? Did you guys do something differently because of the power outage?
Yeah, we didn't have all of our appliances at the old place we live were electric, including our stove. So we had to grab our camping stuff down, and we lived. Our corner of our apartments were just happened to be this where a lot of the seniors lived, and so none of them had power either. And so we ended up doing a lot of communal cooking using propane, which was both fun to be in community, but also difficult because the propane was stinky. So I just remember many nights like feeling like this is a lot because we're going through a lot of propane and people were at our place. This was pre-COVID, of course. But that was an interesting experience. It felt really good and then also kind of nauseating.
Mm-hmm.
It might have also contributed too because there was a generator, one of those backup generators that was right next to us as well. And that was really loud and stinky.
Burning gas, yeah. I'm gonna live a message that during the fires that he and his family weren't affected by the power outages nor the evacuations, but that regardless, they tried being efficient. Thank you for saying that, Logan. I think when we think about like this energy and when critical time to use a lot of energy, able to save that energy for emergency services is really practice. Thank you. What do you guys know about what's happening in Texas right now? Raja?
Are you referring to the ice storms, the storms, the weather there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You want to tell us a little bit for those of us who might not know what's going on?
And well, Texas for almost a month, I believe it has been suffering from storms and extreme cold, ice and snow. It's not the usual weather there. And their power grid is not connected to any other states. So if they don't have power, they can't borrow it from the other states. And on top of that, the power companies are now overcharging people for the power that is left. And that's not exactly legal.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if it's still going on like today too?
I think that they've moved past the deep freeze and now they're in that recovery phase because there was so much damage that was done, like with people's pipes bursting and breaking. There's a lot of rebuild that people are doing right now. And then just dealing with the after effects of the kind of price gouging that the energy industry did there. And then what happened was it got so cold and everybody was using their electricity at the same time to stay warm, especially through the night. And it pulled too much on the power grid and the whole power system went down and people didn't power for days on end in the cold. And so I think what Raja said about the price gouging and how that's really not okay, what happened and how they were taking advantage of those people is a serious social and justice issue that we have to deal with now. And one that perhaps if we didn't have such a monopoly of power, maybe wouldn't have happened.
All right, so I think we have a pretty great list there in terms of encompassing the moment. And the reason why I brought up Texas, and thank you guys all for going there. I know this is it's a pretty intense subject, and I actually have family in Texas and friends that have been affected by this. It's important to point out, I think Nicole just said it pretty darn succinctly. The grid is one of those problems right now in a place like Texas because you have social justice issues, people not able to afford basic necessities due to wealth concentration and power concentration. So where we can go, we're right on time too. I wanted to leave plenty of time for this section, but there's two places where we can go and we are heading. Of course, the sooner the better, but energy shift and energy efficiency are the two. So shifting away, of course, from fossil fuels toward renewable energy will help prevent some of these issues. Of course, climate change being first and foremost as far as the speed with which it's occurring, but also situations like in Texas when you're shifting away. Energy efficiency is the other one. So reducing our demand for and use of fossil fuels. So energy shift and energy efficiency are the two main strategies right now in terms of our energy responses and interventions. Definitely an exciting program that many of you I'm sure are aware of, but if not, it's really important to point out, in general, shifting power back to the public, to us, creating energy resilience, creating localized power. This is going to be the next probably, well, who knows how long, but definitely the 2000s are all going to be about this. Just once again, claiming our power. Here in general, Sonoma Clean Power is a great example of this community choice. So you've probably seen it as a CCA, maybe community choice aggregation, but it's basically a community choice energy in a nutshell, which is the complete opposite model. It's citizens coming together and saying, we no longer want to be subjected to the power companies' control. And so Sonoma Clean Power in the early 2000s said, we're going to do this. And citizens got together and created the first, one of the first in California anyways. And now I believe there are 22, there could be even more, community choice energy providers And it's really exciting. I don't have to go too down the Sonoma Clean Power rabbit hole because all of the resources are going to be available online on the website, but they've done some amazing things. Money no longer goes to shareholders. And so that's a really, really exciting thing, because money that goes to Sonoma Clean Power for providing our power then can be put back into the local economy. And this is a good example of some of the amazing benefits. I think this is really important to point out in general why it's so exciting. Cleaner air, cleaner water, better health, cheaper energy, and then a more robust, resilient grid. And so thinking about electrifying almost everything is the way that we're headed, the way we're going to get through this as far as our energy crises. And Sonoma Clean Power, this is a perfect example. You're all going to get a chance to see this firsthand. They're soon to be opening an advanced energy center in downtown Santa Rosa, where I've heard they will have conference rooms, all electric powered, of course, clean energy powered. You can go, and then also all appliances are electric. We get to learn about all those. They have a ton of incentives for all different types of residents throughout Sonoma County. So really, really exciting. It's a perfect example of a solution that is shifting power back to the public. And then, of course, creating a more resilient grid. So once again, just in general, it's going to be healthier. It's going to be more efficient. We're going to save money on our bills, less maintenance. I mean, all of these things sound amazing. Today we had a gas leak actually in our place. That won't happen anymore because gas will go away. So just a big, exciting place we're headed. And Sonoma County, this is not years off. It's here in Sonoma County now in terms of clean energy. There are kind of two programs Sonoma Clean Power has. One of them is 100% renewable. The other is 50%, but we're headed in a wonderful direction. So important to point out some of the benefits and some of the exciting things that already are happening. So here's the thing I'm most excited about in sharing with you guys. There are tons of design tools out there. The website, we already have a decent amount of these up. There will be more and more. But I wanted to really point out a couple of these: microgrids, sustainable buildings, solar panels, and battery storage. And throughout this part of the presentation, I really want you to think about how these design tools can be implemented in your communities. Because it's one of those things that's going to start with visionaries. That's a big part of policy change, is starting with visionaries and your vision. And oftentimes, the youth have a very powerful voice when it comes to demanding a safe future. So I'm encouraging you to really think about our energy responses here and how they could be implemented in any place that you call community. I know one place is, we've all mentioned our schools, but there also are a couple of different places. For example, I was working with a group at RUP, Emily, Logan, and Daniel mentioned Bayer Farm, and then also the spot by the dollar store in the middle of Roseland where people gather. So think about some of how these design tools could be implemented there when we're crafting our designs. So community microgrids, super exciting. It's one of the coolest things I've seen so far in terms of energy resilience. Self-sufficient energy system that serves a discrete geographic footprint, such as a school, hospital, business center, or neighborhood. Within microgrids, there's, they call it distributed energy resources, DER, but there's usually one or more kinds. So solar panels, wind turbines, combined heat and power generators. It's generally clean energy, and it's created on site. And then the beautiful thing about these microgrids is when you do have a power outage event, fires, high wind event, these microgrids become community hubs, providing power, all over the local areas of which they're in. So not only would homes not go down, but they'd also provide physical locations for safety and power. So Raja was mentioning a little earlier about how it was difficult to power. He could see the fire, but he couldn't hear the news because he didn't have a device that was, really had to watch out energy use wise, didn't have a charged device. These would be community microgrids would be wonderful places. I've heard the term resilience hubs as a way they've been described, but really exciting. And we're just seeing some come on board right now. Certainly in Sonoma County, there's only a couple. California, but then nationally, we're starting to see some real push for getting these implemented. So you can, I wanted to include a couple graphics just to kind of explain some of the really big benefits here. Once again, there are specific locations that this happens. Usually you need a decent amount of land to kind of get all this in, whether it be turbines, whether it be solar panels. You probably have seen some parking lots with solar panels on top, so providing cooling for cars, obviously, of course, from the sun, but then more importantly, distributing in generating and distributing the electricity right from the sun into a space. A big part of this is battery storage, which we're going to get into in a minute. But community microgrids are happening all over the world. It's the U.S. that really needs to catch up. And energy storage and batteries are a big part of this, including vehicles. The big thing I really want to make sure that is understood here is just that the difference in models. Because energy is generated locally, distributed locally, because you can actually plug back into the grid and communicate with the bigger grid, it's just a very, very efficient way of creating energy and storing it. And it's a totally different model, once again, based more on the Sonoma Clean Power model of local control. So it's a really, really cool idea. And it's something that we're going to have to go to. I think the big point to really think about is how do we get this, how do we do this? And there are a lot of different things that need to happen, but having to rewrite federal, state, and local rules and regulations that have been created for our fossil fueled world is a big way to start. Basically, we need to finance this transition to a zero carbon energy system with like a low interest climate loan. So similar to how we've done with auto financing and with mortgages, there's ways to do this where you can finance this based on loans made. And that's one of the ways I've heard that you can possibly get this quick sooner than later, but there needs to be government intervention. And that's ultimately why I mentioned policy so big in this process. Really exciting. So I included two. The one on the right here, I believe, is in Germany. They're ahead of the curve on a lot of different things. They've been investing for dozens of decades. But the one on the left here, does anybody recognize where this is? Now, it could be anywhere, but I'll give you a hint. It's in Santa Rosa. Anybody know where our closest microgrid is?
The Wells Fargo area?
So if there's one in the Wells Fargo area, that would be super cool. I don't know, but I can tell you this one's actually SRJC, which is really cool. They've won a couple of awards, and I think they'll continue to win more and more. They have a pioneer there that has really pushed for a clean energy system on campus, but they're the first university, first community college that I know of in California that's doing this on a grand scale, where SRJC can now become that your local power supplier if you live close to there, and their power will not go down in a power outage, which is really, really cool. So moving into sustainable buildings, there's so much to these sustainable buildings. I think we're going to just kind of keep it right now on some of the different things that we're seeing implemented. But sustainable buildings in general, you're basically using, energy generated on site. Energy efficiency is a big part of this. You can see here, there's a couple other things I would love to ask a question here of the group, because I think your observations are really important. What do you see with this building here? Is there anything you notice specifically in terms of things they're using to be energy efficient and possibly even use less energy in general? Anything you guys notice with this building here?
Well, the solar panels, and I feel like something about the roof and stuff probably provides some insulation. I don't know, that maybe it'll keep it more efficient.
Yeah, so thanks, Terry. You said solar panels here, something about the roof, maybe the shape of the roof. Also, I think you pointing out on the roof, there's actually some vegetation there, right? So you're absolutely right. Anything else?
The vegetation probably can collect rainwater and use that.
Absolutely. It's something like 40%, I believe it's 40% of California's energy goes towards moving water. And so if you can make it easy to store water, you don't have to actually, you're cutting down the amount of energy needed in general for basic necessities, which water is one, of course. Also, I want to point your attention to the shape. Oftentimes, the sun and ventilation can be used to distribute heat places that need heat. So you have the heat coming in through the top, of course, and then you can actually distribute it around to different parts of the building based on where people are. This is one of those really cool things too, and we'll go to the next one in a second. Anytime in a sustainable building, a net zero carbon neutral passive house is another way to describe it. Anytime you're using any heat source, for example, like right now when I use my oven, I get one use, and that is to heat the oven. But we don't actually, a lot of heat is wasted afterwards because it just goes up into the air, up into a vent outside. Anytime in a sustainable building you're using a heat source, that heat is trapped and then used somewhere else. So for example, an oven could go towards heating the living room. So it's really, really an efficient, there's never any energy lost and not used. So just a really, really cool idea. And you all have pointed out a couple different things there already. And the final thing I'll point out too with this one is the use of wood. They're using natural materials, and usually with sustainable buildings, that's all locally sourced wood. So you're not bringing it from long distances. Does anybody recognize this picture on the right? I'll give you a hint. It's somewhere in San Francisco.
It's either the Academy of Science or the Exploratorium.
It's the Academy of Science.
You got it. Absolutely. It is absolutely the Academy of Sciences, although the Exploratorium might have some other energy efficiency aspects as well. But I've been on that roof before. I've actually met with one of the engineers that designed it, and he was really, really excited. It was a fantastic project. I can't remember how much it cost. It was definitely not a cheap thing to do, especially because they were one of the first to do it in the world. But this is a living roof that generates an insane amount of energy from solar panels up there, and also energy efficiency because almost the whole thing is living. So that their heating costs have plummeted. Their air conditioning costs have plummeted because it keeps it cool in the summer and then hot in the winter. Although San Francisco is a little off in terms of when those times are, but the other ones too, you can see they're actually on the left and then in the center. They are actually food producing. So you have roofs now that food and medicine, you can grow food and medicine, which is just a spectacular thing. You don't have to bring it in from a long distance away. So it's multiple benefits, of course, connecting community as well. So green roofs, when you're thinking about your designs, a fantastic way to go. And oftentimes roofs are already meant to hold a decent amount of weight. They're just not being utilized right now in this way. So really, really exciting. Had to name that one. So solar panels, I think everybody has seen solar panels by now. They're becoming, the cost of solar has plummeted over the last decade and a half, which has been really, really exciting. But solar panels are a great way talking about bringing power back to the people and away from long distances. Solar panels, a little bit different technology than turbines, of course. You have photovoltaic cells. And they generate electricity right there. I think that the 1-2 punch though with solar panels and the reason why they haven't been widely adopted yet are both, we're still figuring out supply lines, but more importantly, battery storage, which we'll get to in a second, because having an excess amount of energy which solar panels provide, especially in a place like sunny California, sunny Sonoma County, you need the ability to store power, of course, too. And so this is where battery storage comes in. This is as big as it gets, and battery storage is going down as far as cost, but definitely it's going to be something that needs to come down continuously for this to work. Companies like Tesla are doing a pretty good job, although frustrated Tesla does not have a union, but you're slowly seeing battery storage come down in cost and also just more efficient use. And I did want to name this one too, just because we are here in California. The vehicle to grid is going to be a wonderful way that your electric vehicles, which we're going to see more and more incentives, of course, and it's called vehicle to grid. Has anybody heard of vehicle to grid here? It's kind of a cool idea. So there are peak times between 4 and 9 p.m. usually are when we use our most power. Case in point, all of us right now, it's when we're getting home from work, getting home from school, needing to cook dinner, definitely starting to get dark. So we turn on more lights, heating sources. But with electric vehicles, they not only, of course, can they get you around, but they can become a battery to power, to help put power back into the grid, to take some out. And so it really will help in balancing the overall amount of power, both locally and then, of course, throughout maybe your neighborhood or your city, where you can charge electric vehicles when they are not during peak time. So after 9 p.m., you can just plug it in, and then they become an actual battery. And there were a couple people I used to work with at the Climate Center that didn't lose any power because they had this capability to use their electric vehicle as a backup generator for their home. And so they were able to become a mini microgrid in their neighborhoods throughout Sonoma County and Marin County, which is a really cool idea. You have to have the right converter, of course, but you're seeing this more and more. And I think it'll be once again, going back to the loans that we can make. This can be accessible if we change policy to make it accessible for all income levels. And so this vehicle to grid is going to be a great solution for the future. All right, so I definitely wanted to leave plenty of time for this because this is why we're here, is you all. And then I wanted to also leave time at the end for questions and places we can go. But I'm going to pass it over to Nicole, who is an absolute amazing visualizer and leader of these type of exercises, to take us away on designing our own community energy hub.
Thanks, Kevin. Oh, I'm taking it all in. That was a lot of great information. It made me think about things a little bit differently and like sparked some ideas and creativity. And I'm curious for you guys, are there any ideas being sparked for you about what might be possible for us to?
Are you able to repeat the last part you said? I think it cut out. It may have just been for me. I'm not sure.
No, thanks. What I'm curious is, did it spark any ideas for you? Did you have any imaginations about what might be possible with these ideas in the communities that we live in?
Yeah, I have one specifically. So here in Rosend, there isn't really like Sebastopol Avenue, Sebastopol Street over there, for example. It's a really big street. There's a lot of business there. A lot of people are on that street, but there isn't really like a centralized place that people meet. Like, for example, downtown Santa Rosa, that's the mall. But here, I was thinking we don't have anything like a community center of sorts. So I was thinking making a community center and then making that like what do you call it? I'm not sure what it is, but making that like the center, like I was thinking of that, an idea like that, and making that like a microgrid or something like that.
That's a fan, and it definitely has a need for a gathering space like that. And if you can stack, in permaculture we call it stack functions, if you layer it with lots of different things like a community electrical source and a gathering space and a green space and all the different things that we were exploring here, it might be a really rich offering. What would, if we were to imagine that and run with it for a little bit, right? Like, what might that look like? What simple components would you want to have be a part of that? And I open up to everybody, not just Daniel. But Daniel, I'd like to hear your ideas.
So for starters, I was thinking of like a community center, somewhere where everybody can go in. So for any reason, like just how do I, like a hangout spot, because I also know that like a lot of like teenagers and like people in general aren't, they're just like out on the streets, like hanging out wherever they can really. So having a place where everybody can meet for whatever particular reason they wanted would be great.
Yeah,
Right.
especially in that area, there's a lot of people there.
Uh-huh.
I think solar's.
What would you need? Say that. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Tara.
I think solar is a great thing for like almost anywhere. Trees for just the pleasant value of them, and for the fact that they can produce more oxygen, so they're good for the environment too.
Yeah, I also think that that's a really good point, because also Sebastopol, that street, it's there's a lot of pollution because there's also like a lot of shops, like automobile shops there. So adding trees and that sort of thing would be great to just make the street in general better for everybody.
Yeah, these are great ideas. Also, if I recall correctly, that main area where a lot of people hang out on Pole Road is mostly just like pavement, very many shade structures or natural places that you could rest, right? Mm-hmm. What else? If we could just like fantasize and imagine, what would be the ideal thing to put there? I've heard solar, space to hang out, trees to help with the environmental purification and the air cleansing, shade. What else? How would we get?
I also think that like introducing some kind of enrichment opportunities for not only teenagers but also for adults. So maybe music classes or some just classes in general for people to go there, to have a reason to go there.
I love that idea. Yeah. All right, I like this. So think about this. So we want to have classes there. Maybe we want to have music classes and art classes. So we're going to need to have some good electricity. We've already identified some solar. What else could we do to make sure that we have the energy systems that we need to create this community center?
I think like like we were talking about earlier with the batteries, or like, yeah, just the battery storage for them. And I think there should be enough solar and power being produced for it to be self-sufficient, and then some if it's possible, like extra. Yeah.
So if I hear you correctly, I hear you saying that the battery storage is like an essential part to have, and then figuring out a way to share the extra power with the community.
Yeah.
I think that would meet a need. I know of many people who are unsheltered and don't have regular access to electricity to charge their basic things like a phone for emergency reasons. So I could see an added benefit for community members to have access to a place in their community they could go and charge, like a solar charging station or something.
That sounds really awesome. Yeah.
Now that you bring that up, it also gives me an idea. I don't know if it would be possible now because of COVID, but like some kind of a shared housing, or maybe like an area for people to go if they need, I need a place to stay, I need a place to shower, just to get water, basic necessities in general.
Mm-hmm. What I'm imagining in my mind, based on the ideas that's been shared so far, is a really rich community space that anybody could go to, even even those who are sheltered and who need to have a place to go to hang out and have opportunities, like enrichment opportunities, but also for our unsheltered people who might need to have access to resources. Like the idea of, providing water, places like things like that. And the battery backups you talked about would work well. Yeah, Kevin, a rich community space open to all.
I think the hardest part of getting all of it to work is the cost, especially because of the power or the battery stuff. But I think in the end, it ends up, like at least solar, for example, ends up, you get the money back because you don't have to keep paying for all the other things. It's just a big investment to make it once. And I think that scares a lot of people. Or they don't have that money to begin with, so it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think that's important to note. It's important because it's kind of what grounds our projects in what's real or possible, and money is how we make things, that exchange happen in our community. And like what you had mentioned, though, sometimes we limit ourselves in what we think is possible because we create these barriers of cost. And that cost is a moving variable, right? Sometimes it takes a lot of investment up front. But let's think about money in terms of energy, right? There's an abundance of energy. There's an abundance of resources available. So let's not limit ourselves by thinking that we might have cost barriers. Let's let our imaginations run with it as though there are no barriers. What could we possibly imagine? Because sometimes we need to have the vision and to be able to imagine what's possible outside of barriers in order to have that thing that we want to move towards. And then as the barriers come up, we just navigate those as they come up. We find ways around it. If we're holding to the vision of what we want to create in the world, we can do that. We can transcend barriers that come up. Emily's lifting up that. Yeah, Emily, would you mind talking to that a little?
Yeah, we just discussed that, like, when thinking of these ideas, like, the main thing we always think about is the cost, and I don't believe like that's the most important thing if we're really trying to help our community.
Yeah, thank you for that. Sometimes we create barriers for ourselves, and sometimes those barriers are based on old patterns. So I want to invite in a reframe about the resources that could be available to us for creating this, and think money in terms of energy. And if it's transferred, right? It builds, it decreases, but it doesn't ever go away. The resources are like that. They'll ebb and they'll flow and they'll build and it'll be there for the idea and the vision. So, but we need to have the vision. So we're going to take a few minutes now and have what we call a creative connection activity. You'll need some paper and a pen or something to color with. And we're going to take about maybe 7 to 10 minutes, and we'll do like the breathing exercise that Kevin started us with. We'll kind of quiet ourselves, give ourselves some space for imagination, then to draw or write our ideas down. Then anything that questions. All right, again, I want to invite in, let's just eliminate all potential barriers. The sky's the limit. You can create anything you want. It can be as fantastic as you want. You want to go solar punk art, whatever. You want it to be very basic and neutral and simple, whatever your design preference is. But we're going to take some time now for you to deepen in your imaginations, and then we'll share our ideas. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to put our hands down. Maybe let go of the pen or the crayon and just let your hands rest on your lap. Feeling your feet firmly on the ground. And as you take a slow, deep breath, Thanks, Carissa, for joining us. Now, take good care.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. We'll see you next time. All right, so we're gonna take a couple slow deep beneath you. As you notice your body soften and your breathing slowing down, allow your imagination to wander. Of the ideas and shared here today, maybe reflect on places in our community where you know these things are starting to happen, or where you'd like to see them happen. So if you can, we're gonna do a guided visualization. I'd like to have you imagine yourself, you're walking a pathway or a street, a sidewalk. You're walking to this place in your imagination. And with each step you take, you are closer and closer to this location. And as you get close, notice anticipation, excitement. Now imagine moving. And as you based on some of the concepts we learned today. Reimagine what the buildings could look like. Functions it could have. Notice who's there with you and who uses this space. Notice what brings them there. Why are they there? What are they doing? Now bring your awareness to the energy systems and the energy of the place. Where does the energy come? How might that energy be stored and used? Benefits all the what does that look like with the community using that power, that energy? Now imagine yourself walking to a spot that's right in the center of all. And using your senses, notice everything. What colors do you see? Is there anything missing? What sound? What do you see? This place touches you. Now, from the center place, what are a few things that stand out the most to you? And when you're ready, using the paper and your colors and your pens, draw or write something that represents what you want to bring forth, what you imagined. And we're gonna take, let's take about 5 minutes, 7 minutes or so. We're gonna sketch some things out. I recognize there's never room for creativity, and that we could work on these designs for a long time. And in fact, I hope you do. But in the next minute or so, kind of distill down, put your last thoughts down. We'll come back to whole group and we'll share what our ideas are. All right, this is a good time to put any last minute words, thoughts, ideas. And now let's share. I'm really curious what we can come up with when we put our imaginations together. So now that you've had this time individually to kind of tap into your imagination and reflect and draw, let's share it and see what we can spark amongst each other. I'd like to hear from everyone, but no pressure. And if there's a brave person who'd like to go first, mad props and kudos to you.
I'd be willing to share first.
Thanks, Tara.
Okay. So, I'm kind of taking this idea from other things that I've seen, like other parks and places. I think one in particular I'm thinking of is, I think it's in Windsor. I'm not 100% sure. They just had this nice little stage area too and all this. And I just kind of, let's see if I can get this on here. So I drew like this little layout. So like all these would just be little walkways. So it would be like a rectangle area and it's just a whole bunch of grass and trees everywhere. I was thinking like a little music like stage or something where people can perform if they want. Just, I feel like music is just such a thing to add to the community, and so many people like to meet for those events. And then the large community center and like bathrooms or whatever, and everything is solar on the top. Yeah. Just kind of all the things we touched on, like having the battery, having solar and stuff. So, yeah.
Thanks. So I'm really curious, when you were imagining and hearing the sound and the music, what kind of music were you hearing?
Yeah, I don't know actually. I didn't actually think about that. I just kind of, it's more just like a vibe I get from just having music just being there. Not like particular kind of music even, just like it's a gathering and it's such a, I don't know, it's such a personal thing, music for me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Appreciate it. All right, who'd like to share next? Thank you so much. How about Sophia? We haven't. Oh, Emily's jumping in. Go ahead, Emily.
Sorry. I was just thinking of like an area like where everyone can gather, you know, like children, adults, like there'll be something for everyone. And with the music that she was talking about, like the stage, I was thinking like just anyone who like felt inspired could just go up and perform if they would like to, you know, and they just have an audience or just people walking by and listening would be enough.
That's a beautiful idea. What I'm appreciating about what you both mentioned is the connection of culture and being able to perform and have these things in our culture. Thanks. Anybody else want to volunteer? I don't want to just call out on people, but but I will.
Yeah, I can go next.
Thanks,
I
Anna.
was thinking of a large, again, a community center, and in the center of it all is like an auditorium of sorts. Like what I was thinking of it in my school, we have like the center of the school. It's like they're like stairs coming down, and like you can project something like on screen. And I was thinking like some kind of circular auditorium, and like in the center of it, like again, how they said people can perform or like just things to bring people in together, like let's say movie nights, people performing music, or just presentation. You could also like hold a meeting, like community meetings, like for anything that can be needed. And also like in that building also, it could be like again, like how I said, like somewhere for people to come and just hang out, enrichment classes and some, sorry about that, enrichment classes and some other part of the building. And then also in the roof, it would be covered in solar panels to like provide power for it. And you could also add sports courts for people, like if they don't want to come inside, if people want to like hang out with other people and outdoors and play basketball, soccer, whatever they might need, just an area for that.
Those are great ideas. Thank you for sharing them.
Yeah, I believe like the whole sports, like a soccer field or a basketball court would really be like, they would attract a lot of people there.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys ever heard about kinetic energy generators, where they build these springs into the courts or the blacktops, and as you run or do your athletic activity, it creates kinetic energy, and they store that kinetic energy to then power other things? Made me think about that. Daniel, you sparked that for me.
That's a really awesome idea. Like, is it like a noticeable amount of movement on the floor? Is it just like, how does that work?
I wish that I was an electrician and could answer that question for you, but I don't. But what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of research and we'll follow up with you. All right. I know that in some countries they're looking at technology for roads, that as a car goes down, will not only like produce electricity, but maybe that electricity could then fuel the car instead of relying on fossil fuels. Interesting. Sophia, and then Logan, please.
I had a similar idea to like the road ones, which could be like a playground that generates electricity, like swings or stuff like that. And I also had another idea that was sort of like how the cost can be a barrier for some people. Also like the convenience or their inexperience can also be another barrier. So I was thinking, what if there's like a kit for a garden or for a solar panel? It would it could like expand it as big as they want by buying multiple ones, or like emergency power kit with like solar or battery and stuff.
Love that idea. I like the idea of kits. It makes it really accessible, like to figure out how to do it. I think that you're right, that inexperience can be a barrier sometimes to trying new things. Thank you so much for saying that, Sophia. How about you, Logan?
I wasn't really focused on like during the activity, so I couldn't really think of anything.
I appreciate your honesty. Thank you so much for just keeping it real. But I'm also curious, like, do you have any ideas after you've heard everyone else share ideas? Did it spark anything? Do you have anything else you want to add into our collective imagination?
I really like the idea of Daniel and Tara. Is that how you pronounce her name? I'm not sure. But I like their ideas a lot. And I feel like there could be a lot to add to it, like more activities and stuff, like sports, music, entertainment, people who like acting, stuff like that. So a little bit for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing and for echoing back what you appreciated about the other designs. Yeah, diversity of uses. That's super great. Well, you guys, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, Tara.
Oh, I was gonna add, like,
Amanda?
with the idea of having the like how I was drawing with the different squares and stuff. Like maybe in each of those, like there's different things. So like what Daniel was saying, like having some sports, such as like basketball, and then in two of the other little squares, there's gardens and different things like that. Like everyone's ideas, but all together, just in their own squares, like one large area.
I love that. I think you'd create a blueprint for a community I'd want to live in and be a part of. Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Kevin now. Thanks so much, you guys, for getting creative and sharing your ideas with us.
Wow. Can we get you guys all into positions of power? Santa Rosa. That is quite a vision. I just appreciate there's such a diversity, and I just hear what I hear is that I have an introverted partner that likes to be around people but doesn't want to have to talk. And what I love about what you created is just that you could go and people watch, where you could wander along the path that you had created, Tara, and be able to watch people playing sports or dancing or singing or doing stand-up comedy or just participating in a community meeting. I mean, there's so much there. And so I think the one thing that's coming out to me in all of these, and this is a theme I'm just realizing right now with your ideas, and thank you guys so much for everything you contributed, is that there's not enough places right now for us to just be. Nicole and I were mentioning when we did our first webinar, the places in high school we went, they were the parking lots of fast food restaurants. And nowhere in any of this did I think about that. When we were going through this, these were specific places that were created by you guys, by the community, of course, for a diversity of uses. So I just really, really appreciate that. And one thing that I was going to share the screen again, but I'd rather see your faces. There's a quote that I thought was a good one for our time here to come to an end, at least for this one. And this is a Nelson Mandela quote, and it's a short one. May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. And it is a hope for all of us to have places like these, and they will only exist if we continue to put this out and bring in other people. If not, they will fall away. And so I'm really excited to help inspire you guys to keep coming with these ideas, and we'll put it together in a way that other people can interact with, because I think that's how this will happen. So I'm so excited. Our next webinar is April 1st. That will be how to incorporate art into all of our designs, which you're already doing, but it should be a really fun one. And so this will be available as well, this recording, but then we have tons of resources that are constantly being added. So I believe I do have all of your information, and we look forward to the next one. And thank you for your time and your beautiful spirits and your wonderful creativity. How about this before we go? One word to describe what you're feeling like right now, and then we'll let you go.
Hopeful.
Inspired.
Excited.
Relieved. This is the last Zoom meeting of the day for me.
Me too.
I would also say inspired.
Inspired.
Regenerated.
Inspired. Yeah.
Thank you, friends, for being here.